Picture this: a city so advanced, its streets were laid out in perfect grids, its plumbing systems rivaling modern engineering, yet its name has vanished from history. This isn't science fiction, it's the reality of the Indus Valley civilization, one of countless empires that once dominated the ancient world, only to fade into obscurity. From the labyrinthine palaces of the Minoans to the towering ziggurats of Mesopotamia, these lost societies weren't just footnotes in history, they were the architects of the world we know today. But how could such powerful empires simply disappear, and what can their rise and fall teach us about our own place in history? The truth is, these civilizations didn't just vanish, they were buried, layer by layer, beneath the weight of time, war, and natural disaster. But their legacies are far from gone. Think about the way we build our cities, the way we trade, even the way we govern. Many of these systems were pioneered by cultures we've barely begun to understand. The Minoans, for instance, mastered maritime trade centuries before the Greeks, while the Harappans of the Indus Valley developed standardized weights and measures that would have made modern economists envious. These weren't just isolated achievements, they were the building blocks of global civilization. So why does this matter to you? Because every time we uncover a fragment of these lost worlds, we're not just digging up artifacts, we're rediscovering pieces of ourselves. The conflicts they faced, the innovations they celebrated, even the mistakes that led to their downfall, they all mirror the challenges we grapple with today. This isn't just a story about the past, it's a mirror held up to our future, and that's exactly what we're about to explore. Over the course of this journey, we'll decode the secrets of empires that time forgot, trace their influence across continents, and ask the haunting question, could the fate of these civilizations one day be our own? The answers might surprise you and change the way you see history forever. A lost civilization isn't just a society that disappeared, it's a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Imagine holding an ancient tablet covered in symbols no one can read, or standing in the shadow of a pyramid whose builders left no blueprints. These aren't just relics, they're silent witnesses to entire ways of life that once thrived, then slipped through the cracks of history. Take the Minoans, for example. Their vibrant frescoes and sprawling palaces on Crete suggest a culture rich with art and commerce, yet their written language, Linear A, remains undeciphered. It's like hearing a symphony with every other note erased. We catch glimpses of brilliance but miss the full melody. What makes these civilizations so fascinating isn't just their mystery, but the sheer diversity of their fates. Some, like the Cahokia mound builders of North America, collapsed abruptly, their great cities abandoned within generations. Others, like the Khmer Empire, faded slowly, their temples swallowed by jungles until explorers stumbled upon them centuries later. And then there are places like Doggerland, an entire landscape now submerged beneath the North Sea, where hunter-gatherers once roamed a fertile plain now lost to rising waters. Each story is a reminder that collapse isn't monolithic. It can come from war, climate shifts, or even something as simple as a trade route drying up. But here's the twist: these societies weren't failures. They lasted centuries, even millennia, adapting to challenges we're only beginning to understand. The Maya, for instance, didn't just vanish, they transformed, their descendants still living in the same regions today. Their so-called collapse was really a shift, a reminder that civilizations don't always end. Sometimes they evolve in ways history books struggle to capture. That's the real lesson hidden in these ruins. Resilience isn't about permanence, but about leaving traces that outlast empires. Whether it's the Indus Valley sewer systems or the Nazca's vast desert drawings, these cultures speak to us across time, not through grand narratives, but through the quiet persistence of their innovations. And that's what keeps archaeologists and all of us digging for answers. Archaeology doesn't just uncover lost cities, it breathes life into them. Imagine standing in the middle of a dense jungle, where every sweep of a brush reveals another stone carving, another fragment of a civilization that once thrived. This isn't treasure hunting, it's detective work on a grand scale where even the smallest artifact, a broken clay pot, a worn-down tool, can reveal volumes about how people lived, traded, and even dreamed. Take the Caral Soup civilization in Peru, for instance. Long buried beneath the desert sands, its pyramids and amphitheaters tell us that complex societies were flourishing in the Americas at the same time as the pyramids of Egypt were being built. That's not just a coincidence, it's a revelation. But here's what's truly remarkable. Archaeology isn't stuck in the past. Modern tools like LiDAR, which uses lasers to peer through thick forest canopies, have rewritten maps overnight. The White City in Honduras wasn't some legend, it was real, hidden for centuries until technology lifted the veil. And it's not just about finding structures. Ground-penetrating radar can detect ancient roads, irrigation systems, even the outlines of long-vanished homes, painting a picture of daily life that written records alone could never capture. These aren't just discoveries, they're time machines, transporting us back to moments when these civilizations were at their height. Yet the real magic happens when archaeologists start connecting the dots. A single skeleton can reveal diet, disease, and even social status through isotopes in the bones. Pottery styles trace trade routes across continents, proving that the ancient world was far more interconnected than we ever imagined. Think about it, a shard of Mesopotamian glass found in Scandinavia, or Indus Valley seals uncovered in Mesopotamia. These aren't just objects, they're proof of a global network thriving thousands of years before the Silk Road. And every time we piece together another fragment, we're not just learning about them, we're understanding the foundations of our own world. The challenge, though, is that archaeology is as much about interpretation as it is about excavation. A ruin might be a temple to one researcher and a palace to another. Symbols etched into clay tablets could be poetry, tax records, or even star charts until someone cracks the code. That's why every dig site is like a puzzle with half the pieces missing, where patience and creativity are just as vital as shovels and brushes. And sometimes, the most groundbreaking finds come from re-examining old evidence with fresh eyes. The Nazca lines, for example, were known for decades, but only recently have researchers realized they might be part of a vast celestial map, linking Earth and sky in ways we're only beginning to grasp. What's at stake here isn't just knowledge, it's legacy. These civilizations didn't have a voice until archaeology gave them one. Without it, the Harappans would still be a mystery, their meticulously planned cities and sewage systems lost to time. The Minoans would remain a myth, their vibrant frescoes and maritime prowess forgotten. Every time a new site is uncovered, it's not just about adding to a museum collection, it's about restoring a chapter to the human story. And in a world where so much history has been erased or rewritten, that's more than science, it's justice. The Indus Valley civilization doesn't just defy expectations, it shatters them. While Egypt was building pyramids and Mesopotamia was erecting ziggurats, this society was perfecting something far more revolutionary: urban planning. Walk through the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa, and you'll find streets laid out in precise right angles, houses with indoor bathrooms, and a drainage system so advanced it wouldn't look out of place in a modern city. But here's what's truly astonishing. There's no evidence of palaces, no grand temples, no statues of kings. Unlike their contemporaries who celebrated power through towering monuments, the Indus people seemed to invest in something far more egalitarian: the collective good. This absence of obvious rulers or gods has led to decades of debate. Were they governed by councils instead of kings? Did they prioritize trade and craftsmanship over conquest? The artifacts they left behind, standardized weights, intricate jewelry, even dice for games, hint at a society that valued precision, commerce, and perhaps even leisure. But without a deciphered script, their voices remain silent. The few thousand symbols we've found on seals and tablets could be anything: shopping lists, poetry, or tax records. It's like having a library where every book is locked and no one has the key. Then there's the mystery of their disappearance. Around 1900 BC, their cities began emptying. But unlike other civilizations that fell to invaders or left behind traces of war, the Indus Valley shows no clear signs of violence. Instead, the clues point to something subtler and eerily familiar. Geological records suggest the rivers they depended on shifted course, starving their farmland. Trade routes may have collapsed as Mesopotamia's empires waned. It's a haunting reminder that even the most advanced societies are fragile when nature or economics turns against them. Yet their legacy is anything but lost. Those grid-patterned streets, they're the ancestors of modern urban design. The obsession with clean water, a lesson we're still relearning today. And perhaps most intriguing of all, their apparent rejection of centralized power challenges our assumptions about how civilizations should work. While others built monuments to glorify rulers, the Indus people might have been proving something radical: that a society can thrive not on the whims of the powerful, but on the ingenuity of the collective. That's not just history, it's a provocation. And until we crack their script, it's a conversation they'll keep having with us, one unearthed brick at a time. The Minoans didn't just build palaces, they redefined what a civilization could be. While other Bronze Age powers were erecting walls and glorifying war, Crete's vibrant culture thrived on something radical: openness. Their sprawling complexes at Knossos and Phaistos weren't fortified strongholds but artistic hubs, adorned with frescoes of leaping dolphins and saffron-gathering priestesses. No battle scenes, no depictions of conquest, just a celebration of nature, sport, and what appears to be an almost modern appreciation for beauty. This wasn't just decoration, it was a statement. In a world where power was usually measured in weapons, the Minoans seemed to measure theirs in trade, goods, and cultural influence. Their maritime network stretched from Egypt to Sardinia, with Cretan pottery turning up in ports across the Mediterranean. But here's what sets them apart. Unlike later seafaring empires that conquered, the Minoans connected. Their artifacts suggest they were less interested in domination than in exchange, trading olive oil for Egyptian gold, tin from Anatolia for Syrian ivory. Some scholars argue they created history's first economic globalization, not through force, but through what we'd now call soft power. Then there's the mystery of their collapse. The eruption of Thera around 1600 BC wasn't just a bad day. It was one of the largest volcanic events in human history. Tsunamis would have devastated coastal settlements, while ash clouds blotted out the sun for years. But was nature alone to blame? Around the same time, Mycenaean Greeks began appearing in Cretan art, first as traders, then as rulers. Did invaders exploit the chaos, or were they invited in as allies? The evidence is as layered as the ash deposits at Akrotiri. What lingers most is their cultural afterlife. Greek myths transformed Minone Crete into a land of monsters and miracles. the Minotaur's labyrinth echoing Knosso's maze-like corridors, King Mino's thalassocracy mirroring their naval prowess. But perhaps the greatest testament to their influence isn't in legend, but in reality. When the Mycenaeans took over, they didn't erase Minoan culture, they copied it. Their art, their architecture, even their writing system all bear Cretan fingerprints. For a civilization that supposedly vanished, the Minoans proved remarkably hard to forget. The real question isn't whether they were pacifists, it's why we're so desperate to believe they were. Maybe their appeal lies in offering an alternative blueprint, a vision of civilization where creativity trumped conquest. In a world still grappling with those same tensions, their ruins aren't just relics, they're a challenge. The Hittites didn't just forge iron, they reshaped the ancient world's balance of power. While most Bronze Age kingdoms relied on bronze for weapons and tools, these Anatolian innovators unlocked iron's potential, giving them a military edge that sent shockwaves across the Near East. But their genius wasn't limited to metallurgy. In the dusty archives of Hattusa, their capital, archaeologists found something just as revolutionary: the Treaty of Kadesh, etched in cuneiform around 1286 BC. This wasn't just a truce with Egypt, it was history's first documented peace agreement, complete with clauses on mutual defense and refugee return. Imagine that, a blueprint for diplomacy written in clay, centuries before the concept of international law even existed. What made the Hittites extraordinary was their ability to wield both sword and scroll with equal skill. Their library at Hattusa held thousands of tablets, preserving everything from meticulous legal codes to vivid myths about storm gods. One particularly striking law: if a doctor healed a free citizen, the fee was 10 shekels of silver, but only 5 if the patient was a slave. That distinction reveals a society deeply concerned with justice, yet still bound by hierarchy. And then there's their foreign correspondence, like the letters between Queen Pujuhepa and Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II, negotiating marriages and trade deals with the finesse of modern statesmen. These weren't just rulers, they were master networkers in a world where alliances meant survival. Yet for all their sophistication, the Hittite Empire couldn't outrun the perfect storm of the Bronze Age collapse. Around 1200 BC, a cascade of disasters hit the Mediterranean: droughts, earthquakes, and mysterious raiders modern scholars call the Sea Peoples. Grain stores dwindled, trade routes snapped, and Hattusa's towering walls, once impregnable, became a tomb for a dying civilization. But here's the twist: the Hittites didn't vanish entirely. Survivors fled to Syria, where Neo-Hittite city-states kept their traditions alive for centuries, blending with Assyrian and Aramean cultures. Their legacy lingered in the iron tools that spread across Europe, the diplomatic conventions adopted by later empires, even the mythical giants mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, said to descend from Hittite warriors. The real lesson of the Hittites isn't just about rise and fall, it's about adaptation. They thrived not by brute force alone, but by merging innovation with pragmatism. When iron was scarce, they traded for it. When Egypt proved unbeatable, they brokered peace. And when their empire collapsed, fragments of their culture took root elsewhere. In that sense, they're more than a cautionary tale. They're proof that civilizations don't truly end, they transform. The next time you see a steel skyscraper or read about international treaties, remember, the echoes of Hattusa's scribes and smiths are still with us, whispering across 3,000 years. Deep in the swampy lowlands of Mexico's Gulf Coast, where humidity hangs thick and rivers carve through dense jungle, the Olmecs built a civilization that defied logic. This wasn't just another ancient society, it was Mesoamerica's blueprint. While Egypt's pyramids were rising, the Olmecs were sculpting something even more enigmatic: colossal stone heads, some weighing over 20 tons, with features so distinct they seem to stare across the centuries. But these weren't just art, they were statements, carved from single basalt blocks hauled from mountains 50 miles away, without wheels or pack animals. Each head likely portrayed a ruler, an early glimpse of the god-king tradition later adopted by the Maya and Aztecs. What's staggering isn't just their artistry, but their innovations. The Olmecs didn't just play ball games, they invented them, constructing courts where rituals unfolded under the watch of rubber-clad players. Their version of the game wasn't sport, it was cosmology in motion, a reenactment of celestial battles with life or death stakes. Then there's their writing system, the earliest in the Americas, with glyphs that hint at sacred calendars and royal proclamations. A single carved stone slab from Cascajal, covered in 62 symbols, might be their Rosetta Stone if only we could read it. Yet for all their achievements, the Olmec heartland was an improbable cradle of civilization. Unlike the fertile Nile or Tigris valleys, this was a landscape of mangroves and mosquitoes where floods alternated with droughts. Their solution, a network of artificial reservoirs and canals so precise they'd make a hydraulic engineer nod in respect. At sites like La Venta, they reshaped the earth itself, building pyramids aligned to celestial events and burying elaborate offerings, jade figurines, magnetized mirrors, even mosaics made of hundreds of polished stones beneath their plazas. These weren't random acts, they were sacred geometry, a dialogue between earth and sky. Then, around 400 BC, their cities fell silent. No invading armies, no ash-covered ruins, just gradual abandonment. Some blame the rivers changing course, choking their trade networks. Others point to volcanic eruptions or soil exhaustion from centuries of farming. But the most haunting theory, that the Olmec's own elite overreached, their demands sparking revolt among the people who hauled those massive stone heads. It's a pattern we've seen before, societies crumbling under their own weight. Yet disappearance isn't the same as defeat. Walk through any Maya city, and you'll see Olmec fingerprints in the ball courts, the jade masks, even the worship of the feathered serpent, later known as Quetzalcoatl. Their calendar system evolved into the Maya-long count. Their art styles echoed in Zapotec tombs. The Olmecs didn't vanish. They melted into the cultural DNA of every civilization that followed. That's the paradox of the mother culture. They're everywhere and nowhere. Their name forgotten, but their legacy unshakable. Perhaps that's the ultimate tribute, to become so essential that no one remembers you invented it. High in the rugged highlands of northern Ethiopia, where the air is thin and the horizon stretches endlessly, the kingdom of Axum didn't just exist, it dominated. Imagine a city so wealthy, it minted coins in gold, silver, and bronze, stamped with the faces of its kings in profiles so regal they could rival Roman emperors. Ships from as far as India and Ceylon docked at its Red Sea ports, unloading spices, silk, and glass in exchange for ivory, tortoise shell, and that most precious commodity of the ancient world, Aksumite gold. This wasn't some isolated outpost. It was a crossroads of continents, a place where African, Arab, and Mediterranean cultures collided and thrived. But Axum's brilliance wasn't just measured in commerce. Look at the stelae, those towering obelisks carved from single slabs of granite, some reaching over 100 feet tall. The largest, now fallen, would have dwarfed Rome's columns. These weren't mere monuments, they were feats of engineering, hauled and erected without pulleys or cranes, each one a testament to a society that combined ambition with precision. And then there's the audacity of their faith. In the 4th century, King Azana made a decision that would echo for millennia. He embraced Christianity decades before Rome's conversion. The ruins of the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion still stand in Axum, where legend claims the Ark of the Covenant resides, a spiritual heartbeat that pulses through Ethiopia to this day. So what happened to this African superpower? The decline wasn't sudden, but a slow unraveling. Trade routes shifted as Arab empires rose, redirecting wealth away from the Red Sea. The land itself may have turned against them. Tree rings and sediment layers suggest a climate growing drier, making agriculture precarious. Yet even in retreat, Aksum refused to vanish. Its script Jais became the liturgical language of Ethiopian orthodoxy. Its architectural style, distinctive stepped platforms, inspired later churches carved into cliffs at Lalibela. And perhaps most strikingly, its royal lineage endured, with emperors tracing their bloodline back to Aksum's kings right up until the 20th century. That's the real revelation here. Aksum forces us to rewrite the story of Africa's role in antiquity. This wasn't a continent waiting for outsiders to bring civilization. It was an innovator, a disruptor, a node in a global network long before the word globalization existed. When we reduce ancient Africa to pyramids and deserts, we miss the dynamism of places like Aksum, where African rulers corresponded with Byzantine emperors as equals, where merchants haggled in markets that felt like the center of the world. Its ruins aren't just relics, they're a rebuttal to centuries of overlooked history, and in a world still grappling with whose past gets remembered, that's not just archaeology, it's justice. The Nabateans didn't just survive the desert, they thrived in it, turning barren cliffs into a metropolis that glittered like a mirage. Picture this, a city carved entirely from rose-red sandstone, its temples and tombs glowing at dawn as if lit from within. Petra wasn't just a capital, it was a feat of defiance, a declaration that even the harshest landscapes could be bent to human will. But the real marvel wasn't the facades, it was what lay beneath. While other kingdoms relied on rivers, the Nabateans engineered a labyrinth of channels, cisterns, and dams that captured every precious drop of rainwater. Their hydraulic system was so precise, it could sustain a population of 20,000 in a place where nature offered almost nothing. This mastery of the desert gave them control over something even more valuable: trade. For centuries, camel caravans laden with frankincense and myrrh snaked through Petra's Sick, the narrow canyon that served as its gateway. These weren't just spices, they were the oil of the ancient world, burned in temples from Rome to Persia. The Nabateans taxed every bale, amassing wealth that funded their soaring temples and the iconic treasury, whose purpose remains debated. Was it a royal tomb, a temple, or a vault for their riches? The ambiguity only adds to its allure, yet Petra's splendor hid a vulnerability. The Nabateans' entire economy hinged on overland trade, and when Rome shifted to sea routes in the 1st century CE, their monopoly crumbled. Emperors like Trajan annexed their territories, redirecting caravans to new roads. By the 7th century, Petra was empty, its water channels choked with sand, its grand facades known only to local Bedouin tribes. For over 1,000 years, the West forgot it existed until a Swiss explorer disguised as a pilgrim rediscovered it in 1812, sparking a fascination that still draws millions today. What lingers isn't just the beauty of their ruins, but the lesson they embody. The Nabateans didn't fall to war or catastrophe, they were outmaneuvered by globalization. Their story mirrors modern anxieties about shifting trade routes, technological disruption, the fragility of even the most ingenious systems. But there's a twist: though their political power faded, their cultural influence didn't. The Arabic script used across the Middle East today evolved from Nabatean writing. Their water techniques inspired desert communities for generations. And Petra itself endures, not as a relic but as a testament to human adaptability. The next time you hear about a thriving city facing economic upheaval, remember, the Nabateans saw it first. Their ghosts whisper that civilizations don't end, they transform. The jungles of Cambodia hide more than just vines and wildlife. They cradle the bones of an empire that turned water into power. At its peak, the Khmer Empire didn't just build Angkor Wat, that breathtaking temple complex stretching across 500 acres. They engineered an entire hydraulic metropolis, a labyrinth of canals, moats, and reservoirs so vast it could rival modern water systems. The largest, the West Baray, still holds water today, a rectangular lake spanning 5 miles, dug by hand over 1,000 years ago. But this wasn't just about aesthetics, it was survival. Monsoon rains flooded the land for half the year, then vanished for months. The Khmer's solution: capture every drop, redistribute it through a grid of channels, and transform a flood-prone jungle into an agricultural powerhouse. What's staggering isn't just the scale, but the precision. Satellite imagery reveals a spiderweb of canals aligning with celestial events, suggesting the system wasn't just functional, it was sacred. Water flowed from mountaintop shrines down to rice paddies in a symbolic cycle mirroring Hindu cosmology. The Khmer didn't just control water, they worshipped it, weaving engineering and spirituality into a single vision. And it worked. By the 12th century, Angkor supported up to 750,000 people, more than any medieval European city. Their reservoirs stocked fish, their canals transported goods, and their rice surpluses fueled an empire that dominated Southeast Asia for 6 centuries. Yet this brilliance contained the seeds of collapse. Recent studies of tree rings and sediment layers tell a chilling story. Decades of drought in the 14th century, followed by catastrophic floods. The Khmer had pushed their system to the limit, deforesting hillsides to expand farmland, silt clogging their once pristine canals. When the rains faltered, their reservoirs evaporated. When deluges came, the denuded landscape couldn't absorb the water, triggering erosion that buried their infrastructure under mud. The very ingenuity that sustained them may have hastened their downfall, a parable for any civilization that mistakes dominion over nature for invincibility. But here's the twist: the Khmer didn't vanish. Unlike the Maya or Easter Islanders, their decline was slow, their culture persistent. Angkor wasn't abandoned overnight. It faded, its people migrating south to new cities like Phnom Penh, adapting rather than collapsing. Even today, Cambodian farmers use ancient Khmer irrigation techniques, and Angkor Wat remains a living temple, its lotus-shaped towers a testament to resilience. That's the real lesson here. The Khmer's legacy isn't just a warning about environmental hubris, it's proof that civilizations don't always rise and fall in clean arcs. Sometimes they pivot, leaving behind not just ruins but blueprints for survival. High in the sandstone cliffs of the American Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi, built a civilization that defied the harsh desert. Their story isn't one of grand monuments or sprawling cities, but of intimate harmony with a landscape that seems almost inhospitable. Picture this: multi-story dwellings tucked into alcoves 1,000 feet above canyon floors, their walls blending seamlessly with the rock. These weren't just shelters, they were celestial observatories. At Choco Canyon, the great house of Pueblo Bonito aligns with the solstices, its windows framing the sun like a natural calendar. In Mesa Verde, the cliff palaces cling to the rock with such precision. It's as if the mountains themselves welcomed their inhabitants. But what's truly remarkable isn't just where they built it, it's how they thrived. In a land where rain is scarce and temperatures swing from scorching to freezing, the Anasazi mastered dryl and farming, cultivating maize, beans, and squash in terraced fields. They engineered check dams and reservoirs to capture every drop of runoff, turning marginal land into a breadbasket. Their pottery, intricately painted with geometric patterns, reveals a culture rich in symbolism and trade, with seashells from California and turquoise from Mexico found in their ruins. This wasn't isolation, it was connectivity woven across a vast and rugged terrain. Then, around 1300 CE, something shifted. The great houses emptied. Kivas, their ceremonial chambers, were sealed. The trails leading to the cliffs grew quiet. For decades, archaeologists blamed drought, and tree rings confirmed the region suffered a devastating dry spell. But newer evidence complicates the story. Burn marks on some structures suggest unrest, while others show signs of careful, deliberate closure, as if the people meant to return. The truth may lie in both. A society strained by environmental stress, yes, but also one making deliberate choices to adapt. Here's where the narrative gets rewritten. The Anasazi didn't vanish, they migrated. Oral histories from modern Pueblo peoples, the Hopi, Zuni, and others, trace their ancestry to these cliff dwellers. Their Kachina ceremonies, their agricultural practices, even their clan systems echo traditions that stretch back to Choco and Mesa Verde. When Spanish explorers arrived centuries later, they encountered thriving Pueblo villages, their architecture and cosmology unmistakably linked to the so-called lost civilization. The disconnect isn't in history, it's in how we tell it. That's the real lesson of the Anasazi. Their story isn't about disappearance, it's about resilience in motion. When the land could no longer sustain them, they didn't collapse, they transformed, carrying their knowledge into new landscapes. Today, Pueblo artists still craft pottery with designs passed down generations. Farmers still sing the old prayers for rain, and in places like Choco, descendants return for ceremonies, bridging ancient and modern in a continuum outsiders once called lost. The cliffs may be silent, but the people never left. They were here all along, whispering across the centuries that survival isn't about permanence, but about knowing when to hold on and when to move forward. The Moch didn't just make pottery, they turned clay into a mirror for their entire cosmos. Walk through a museum displaying their ceramics, and you'll find vessels shaped like warriors mid-battle, priests holding ritual knives, even scenes of intimate acts so explicit they shocked early archaeologists. But these weren't mere decorations, they were narratives. A single bottle might depict the entire life cycle of a crop, from planting to harvest, while another shows a deity with fanged teeth and rolling eyes, part human, part jaguar, part something beyond our understanding. The Moch had no written language, so their art became their archive, a visual encyclopedia of power, faith, and daily life. What's astonishing is how lifelike their work remains. Modern CT scans of Moch metalwork reveal techniques so advanced, they rival Renaissance goldsmithing. A ceremonial headdress might combine hammered gold, turquoise inlay, and delicate feather attachments, each component engineered to catch the light during sacred processions. Then there's the pottery, not just erotic scenes, but portraits so individualized, scholars suspect they depict real people. Some faces reappear across decades of artifacts, aging like biographical records in clay. Was this a king, a revered ancestor? The line between portrait and deity blurs, leaving us to wonder, did the Moch worship their rulers, or did their rulers become gods through art? Yet for all their craftsmanship, the Moch's greatest masterpiece might have been their hydraulic systems. In a land where rain rarely falls, they channeled Andean snowmelt through miles of canals, turning desert valleys into lush farmland. Their capital, Huacas de Moch, boasted two massive adobe pyramids, Huaca del Sol and Huaca de Luna, one for governance, one for ceremony, their brickwork tinted with mineral pigments that still glow faintly after 15 centuries. But here's the haunting part, those same bricks hold fingerprints. Pressed into the clay are the marks of countless workers, a silent testament to the labor that built an empire. Then, around 600 CE, the rains came. Not gentle showers, but catastrophic downpours likely triggered by an extreme El Niño event. Excavations at Huaca de Luna reveal layers of flood sediment mixed with shattered murals. Next came drought, then sand, swallowing canals and fields. Yet the Moch didn't just succumb, they adapted. Further north, sites like Pampa Grande show a resurgence, with new elites rising and old rituals evolving. Their art changed too. Fewer portraits, more abstract symbols. Was this decline or reinvention? The answer might lie in their last great innovation, metallurgy. Moch smiths pioneered electrochemical plating, gilding copper with gold to create objects that shimmered like solid treasure. When Spaniards arrived centuries later, they'd marvel at similar techniques among the Inca, where they were witnessing a technology perfected by the Moch long before. That's the ultimate irony. A civilization remembered for its art might have left its most enduring legacy in science. Their goldwork dazzles us, their pottery fascinates us, but their real story isn't about beauty. It's about resilience, a culture that faced nature's fury and responded not with surrender but with reinvention. And in that, they speak not just to the past, but to our own era of climate uncertainty. Long before Rome became the eternal city, the hills of central Italy belonged to a people whose brilliance still echoes through history, the Etruscans. Picture a civilization where miners extracted copper and iron with techniques so advanced, their metalwork became prized across the Mediterranean. Their tombs, painted with vibrant scenes of banquets and chariot races, reveal a society that celebrated life as vividly as the afterlife. But what truly set them apart wasn't just their craftsmanship, it was their influence on the young republic growing beside them. The very symbol of Roman power, the fasces, those bundled rods and axes carried by magistrates, was an Etruscan invention. Even Rome's sacred rituals, from reading omens in bird flights to the layout of their temples, bore the unmistakable stamp of Etruscan tradition. Yet for all their contributions, the Etruscans remain enigmas. Their language, unrelated to any major European family, survives only in fragments, thousands of inscriptions, but no Rosetta Stone to unlock their meaning. The few texts we have, mostly funeral epitaphs and ritual formulas, hint at a sophisticated culture with its own literature and laws. But without a bilingual key, their voices are muted, their stories told only through the artifacts they left behind. Take the famous bronze statue of the Chimera of Arezzo. Its snarling lion's head and coiling serpent's tail, a masterpiece of myth and metal. Or the elaborate gold jewelry found in their tombs, woven so finely it could rival modern craftsmanship. These weren't just objects, they were statements of identity, proclaiming a culture both distinctive and deeply connected to the wider Mediterranean world. The mystery deepens when we consider their decline. Unlike the Hittites or the Minoans, the Etruscans didn't collapse from invasion or disaster. They were slowly absorbed. As Rome expanded, Etruscan cities one by one became Roman allies, then Roman subjects, then simply Roman. Their elites married into patrician families, their gods merged with the Roman pantheon, their alphabet, adapted from the Greeks, evolved into Latin script. By the 1st century BC, their language had faded from daily use, surviving only in religious rites. It's a vanishing act that puzzles historians. How does a dominant civilization become a footnote in its own homeland? The answer might lie in their greatest legacy: flexibility. The Etruscans weren't erased, they were woven into the fabric of Rome, that toga you picture on Roman senators. Originally Etruscan, the gladiatorial games rooted in Etruscan funeral rites. Even Rome's iconic sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, was engineered with Etruscan expertise. In a twist of irony, the civilization that disappeared gave its conqueror the tools to rule the world. Perhaps their story isn't about loss at all, but transformation, proof that cultural legacy isn't measured in monuments left standing, but in traditions that endure. When we walk through Rome today, we're not just walking through a Roman city. We're walking through the ghost of Etruria, its whispers still shaping the stones beneath our feet. Göbekli Tepe doesn't just push the boundaries of history, it shatters them. Standing atop a wind-swept hill in southeastern Turkey, this sprawling complex of carved limestone pillars isn't merely old, it's impossibly ancient. Built around 9,600 BC, it predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years and the Great Pyramids by 7,000. But here's what really upends everything. This wasn't the work of farmers or city dwellers. The people who erected these stones were hunter-gatherers, nomads who hadn't yet discovered agriculture or pottery. That fact alone forces us to rewrite one of archaeology's most fundamental assumptions, that complex societies could only emerge once humans settled down to farm. The scale of Göbekli Tepe is staggering. Imagine 20 circular enclosures, each anchored by towering T-shaped pillars weighing up to 20 tons, some etched with intricate reliefs of scorpions, foxes, and vultures. These weren't crude monoliths, they were masterpieces of symbolic art, hauled from quarries over a mile away without wheels or beasts of burden. The logistics alone hint at something extraordinary, a society capable of organizing hundreds of workers, feeding them during construction, and sustaining a shared vision across generations. And all of it, every chisel mark, every aligned stone was deliberately buried around 8,000 BCE, filled in with rubble as if sealing away a sacred secret. What was this place? A temple, a cosmic observatory. The pillars' alignment with celestial events suggests ritual significance, while the absence of domestic debris, no hearths, no homes, implies it wasn't a village. Some researchers speculate it was a pilgrimage site, drawing scattered bands of hunter-gatherers for seasonal gatherings. Others see it as a social experiment, proof that communal labor and shared belief, not just surplus grain, could bind people together. One thing's certain, Göbekli Tepe's builders weren't the primitive wanderers we've long imagined. They were visionaries who reshaped their world with nothing but stone tools and collective purpose. The implications ripple far beyond archaeology. If hunter-gatherers could engineer such monuments, perhaps agriculture wasn't the spark of civilization after all, but a response to its demands. Think about it, feeding Göbekli Tepe's workforce would have required reliable food sources, possibly spurring early experiments with cultivating wild grains. In this light, farming wasn't the cause of complex society. It might have been its byproduct that flips the traditional narrative on its head, suggesting spirituality and social cohesion, not just economics, drove humanity's first great leap forward. Yet the most haunting question remains: who were these people? Unlike the Egyptians or Mesopotamians, they left no names, no kings, no written records. Their identity is etched only in stone, their legacy hidden in the very fact that they chose to bury their masterpiece. Perhaps that's the ultimate lesson of Göbekli Tepe. Civilizations aren't defined by what they build, but by what they compel us to rethink. Every time we brush the dust off another pillar, we're not just uncovering ancient history, we're rediscovering the boundless ingenuity of the human spirit. And in that, the stones still have much to say. The Mediterranean world of the late Bronze Age was a web of glittering palaces, bustling ports, and empires that had thrived for centuries until the Sea Peoples arrived. Imagine a force so destructive, it left Egyptian pharaohs boasting of bloody victories in the same breath they begged the gods for deliverance. Inscriptions at Medinet Habu depict waves of invaders arriving by ship and land, their horned helmets and round shields striking terror into the heart of a civilization that had faced down the Hittites at Kadesh. Yet for all the chaos they unleashed, the Sea Peoples remain history's ultimate enigma. We don't know what they called themselves, where they came from, or even if they were a unified group at all. What we do know is the scale of their impact. Between 1200 and 1150 BCE, city after city fell into flames. The Hittite capital Hattusa was abandoned, its mighty walls reduced to rubble. Mycenaean Greece collapsed, its palaces sacked so thoroughly that later Greeks believed their ancestors had been giants. Even Egypt, the superpower of the age, barely survived, its Nile delta ravaged by battles so costly they drained the treasury for generations. The irony, these attackers left almost no trace of their own culture. No distinctive pottery, no writings, just the smoldering ruins of everyone else's greatness. So who were they? The leading theory suggests they weren't a single people, but a desperate mix of displaced populations, refugees, mercenaries, and pirates thrown together by climate change and famine. Tree rings from this period reveal a prolonged drought stretching from Greece to Mesopotamia, a catastrophe that would have turned fertile lands into dust bowls. Starving communities might have taken to the sea, raiding not out of malice but survival. Others argue they were skilled opportunists, exploiting the fragility of overstretched empires. Egyptian reliefs show families traveling with the warriors, hinting at migrations rather than mere raids. The real lesson of the Sea Peoples isn't just about destruction, it's about interdependence. Their rampage exposed how tightly linked the Bronze Age world had become. A disruption in Anatolia's tin trade could paralyze metalworkers in Egypt. A pirate fleet blocking Cyprus copper shipments might cripple armies hundreds of miles away. When the threads of this network snapped, the entire system unraveled in a cascade we now call the Bronze Age collapse. Yet from the ashes came unexpected renewal. The chaos cleared the way for new powers like the Phoenicians and early Greeks, who built their trading empires atop the old order's wreckage. Iron, once a rare novelty, replaced bronze as the metal of choice, not because it was better, but because the old supply chains had shattered. The Sea Peoples didn't just end an era, they forced the Mediterranean to reinvent itself. Their ghostly legacy lingers in questions we still grapple with today. How do societies respond to climate refugees? What happens when globalization's safety nets fail? The Sea Peoples remind us that history's most transformative forces often emerge from the edges of the map, wielding not just swords, but the power of sheer unpredictability. And perhaps that's why they haunt our imagination, not as villains or victims, but as a mirror to our own fragile, interconnected world. Buried beneath the sun-baked soil of southern Spain lies a mystery as tantalizing as Atlantis itself, the lost civilization of Tartessos. Around 1000 BC, where the Guadalquivir River meets the Atlantic, this enigmatic culture thrived at the crossroads of worlds. Their art blended the geometric patterns of local Iberian tribes with the intricate goldwork of Phoenician traders, creating a style entirely their own. The Carambolo treasure says it all 21 pieces of gold jewelry so finely crafted. Their spiral motifs seem to pulse with life even now. This wasn't just wealth, it was a statement. Tartessos had mastered the alchemy of cultural exchange, turning foreign influences into something uniquely brilliant. But here's where the plot thickens. Ancient Greek writers, including Herodotus, spun tales of Tartessian kings who ruled silver-rich lands beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Some even speculate these accounts filtered down to Plato, morphing into his legendary Atlantis. Parallels are uncanny, a maritime power advanced beyond its time, vanishing without a trace. Yet unlike Atlantis, Tartessos left behind physical proof like the inscribed stone tablet from Hulva, bearing Europe's oldest known indigenous script. Those cryptic symbols remain undeciphered, a silent language waiting to be cracked. What caused their downfall? The theories are as dramatic as the legends. One clay tablet from Assyria mentions a place called Tartessians suffering a catastrophic flood. Could rising seas have swallowed their ports? Others point to the Phoenicians, their longtime partners, who may have turned from allies into conquerors as Mediterranean power shifted. Then there's the eerie abandonment of their cities, no layers of ash from invasion, just orderly burials and emptied homes, as if they'd packed up and walked away. The real magic of Tartessos lies in how it straddles the line between history and myth. Every artifact pulls us closer to truth, yet deepens the mystery. Take their sacred bronzes of bulls and goddesses. Were they honoring local deities or adapting Phoenician Astarte? Even their name echoes through time. The biblical Tarshish, famed for its ships, might well be Tartessos, a place so real it anchored legends, yet so elusive it slipped through history's fingers. Perhaps that's the lesson here. Civilizations don't always end with a bang. Sometimes they dissolve like salt in water, their essence lingering long after their form is gone. The Tartessians remind us that history isn't just about facts, it's about the stories we tell to fill the silences. And in those gaps between gold and clay, between flood and flight, the past keeps whispering. The Sahara seems like the last place you'd expect a civilization to flourish, a sea of dunes where temperatures soar and rain might not fall for years. Yet deep in Libya's desolate heart, the Garamantes didn't just survive. They built a kingdom that turned the desert into a cradle of innovation. Picture this, sprawling mud brick cities like Garama, their streets bustling with traders from across Africa, their warehouses stocked with ivory, gold, and slaves exchanged with Carthage and Rome. But none of this would have been possible without their masterstroke, the Fagaras. These weren't just wells, they were underground tunnels, some stretching over 4 miles, dug at precise gradients to channel ancient fossil water from aquifers deep beneath the sands. It was a hydraulic miracle, transforming barren valleys into lush date palm groves and wheat fields. What's astonishing isn't just their engineering, it's their foresight. The Garamantes didn't stumble upon this technology. They perfected it over centuries, likely adapting techniques from Persian Qanats. Each Fagara required communal labor to dig and maintain, with tunnels narrow enough to prevent evaporation but wide enough to feed entire oases. Archaeologists have found thousands of these shafts, a hidden latticework sustaining a population that may have reached 100,000 at its peak. Their cities boasted multi-story buildings, public baths, and even a written script Libico-Berber inscriptions that still defy full translation. This wasn't a scrappy desert outpost. It was a sophisticated state thriving where others saw only wasteland. Yet their greatest strength held the seeds of their downfall. Fossil water isn't renewable once drained, it's gone. By the 5th century CE, the Fagaras began running dry. Trees died, fields withered, and trade routes shifted as the Sahara grew ever more inhospitable. But here's the twist, the Garamantes didn't just vanish. They adapted, retreating to smaller settlements, switching to livestock herding, their descendants blending into the Tuareg and other nomadic groups. Their kingdom faded, but their legacy lingers in the very tools modern Libyans use to tap the same dwindling aquifers today. That's the haunting parallel. The Garamantes story isn't just ancient history, it's a warning etched in sand. They mastered their environment, yes, but they also assumed its bounty was endless. Sound familiar? From California's depleted aquifers to the Aral Sea's dust-choked ruins, we're replaying their crisis on a global scale. The difference? We have their example to learn from. Their fagaras still crisscross the desert, silent teachers in a world racing toward the same precipice. Perhaps their true lesson isn't about collapse, but about the choices we make before it's too late. Deep in the yellow earth of China's heartland, where the Yellow River carves its winding path, lies the shadow of a kingdom that may or may not have been. The Zia Dynasty is history's tantalizing enigma, a civilization celebrated in ancient texts, yet one that leaves barely a whisper in the archaeological record. Chinese chronicles like the Bamboo Annals and Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian describe a golden age of wise rulers, bronze craftsmanship, and flood control feats under Yu the Great, who supposedly tamed the Yellow River's deadly floods with a network of canals. But here's the catch: not a single palace, tomb, or inscription has been definitively linked to this legendary dynasty. The debate over the Zia isn't just academic, it cuts to the core of how civilizations remember themselves. For centuries, Chinese scholars treated the Zia as historical fact, the proud foundation of their 5,000-year civilization. But in the early 20th century, skeptical historians, influenced by Western archaeology, demanded physical proof. The resulting search led to sites like Erletu in Henan province, where sprawling palace foundations and bronze workshops hint at a complex society around 1900 BCE, right when the Zia supposedly flourished. Yet without written records naming the Zia directly, the connection remains speculative. Is Erletu the lost Zia capital, or just another Bronze Age culture lost to time? What makes this more than a scholarly squabble is how the Zia mirrors the origin stories of so many ancient peoples. The Romans claimed descent from Trojan refugees. The Japanese chronicled emperors tracing back to sun goddesses. These narratives aren't just myths, they're cultural glue, binding communities to a shared past. The Zia served a similar purpose, giving China's later dynasties a venerable ancestor to invoke, a way to say, "We've always been here." Even today, textbooks in China often present the Zia as history, while Western scholars lean toward legend. But perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. The Erletu site reveals a society advanced enough to match textual descriptions of the Zia, bronze ritual vessels, elite burials, even what might be the earliest prototype of the Chinese palace complex. If the Zia weren't a centralized dynasty, could they have been a confederation of early states later mythologized into a single lineage? Or maybe the stories of Yu the Great preserve folk memories of real hydraulic engineers who mastered the Yellow River's floods, their deeds growing grander with each retelling. The real lesson of the Zia isn't about proving a dynasty's existence, it's about the power of origin stories to shape nations. Whether fact or fiction, the Zia gave China a narrative anchor, a way to root its identity in antiquity. And in that sense, it doesn't matter if the Zia were real in the way we understand history today. What matters is that they were real enough to inspire, to endure, and to remind us that sometimes the past isn't just what happened, it's what we choose to remember. The Clovis people didn't just hunt mammoths, they left behind a signature so unmistakable, it rewrote the story of the Americas. Picture this: sleek, fluted spear points, their edges razor-sharp, scattered across the continent from Montana to Mexico. For decades, these artifacts were the smoking gun, proof that around 13,000 years ago, a wave of big game hunters crossed Beringia, the Ice Age land bridge, and became the first Americans. The Clovis first theory wasn't just a hypothesis, it was gospel, etched into textbooks as the definitive origin story. But like all good mysteries, the truth turned out to be far more complicated. Take Monte Verde, a site tucked into the damp peatlands of southern Chile. Here, archaeologists uncovered wooden huts, knotted cords, even chewed up medicinal leaves, all dating back over 14,000 years. That's 1,000 years older than the oldest Clovis point. How did people reach the southern tip of the Americas so quickly if they'd just arrived in Alaska? The math doesn't add up unless we rethink the entire journey. Maybe they didn't trudge slowly through an icy corridor inland. Maybe they skirted the coast in boats, following kelp highways rich with seals and fish, hopping from refuge to refuge as glaciers retreated. Then there's the puzzle of the tools themselves. Clovis points are masterpieces of Stone Age engineering, their distinctive fluted bases designed to slot seamlessly into spear shafts. But recent discoveries suggest this technology didn't emerge in isolation. Similar fluting appears in older points from Siberia, hinting at a shared ancestry. And at sites like Gault in Texas, layers beneath Clovis reveal cruder, older blades, evidence that the first Americans might have been experimenting for generations before perfecting their iconic weapons. The real twist: Clovis might not have been a single culture at all, but a brilliant idea that spread like wildfire. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a viral trend, a weapon so effective neighboring groups adopted it, adapted it, and made it their own. That could explain why Clovis points appear and vanish so abruptly in the archaeological record. They weren't the start of the story. They were a fleeting chapter in a much longer saga of innovation and survival. Now, new finds are chipping away at old certainties. Footprints in New Mexico's White Sands National Park, pressed into mud over 23,000 years ago, suggest humans were here far earlier than anyone dared guess. Caves in the Yukon yield bones with cut marks from butchering, dating back 24,000 years. Each discovery paints a messier, richer picture, not a single wave of migration, but pulses of people arriving by land and sea, some thriving, others vanishing without a trace. What's at stake isn't just a timeline, it's our understanding of resilience. The Clovis people, whoever they were, lived in a world of chaos. Ice sheets were melting, ecosystems shifting, megafauna dying out. Yet they adapted, spreading across 2 continents in what, geologically speaking, was the blink of an eye. Their legacy isn't just in stone points, but in the sheer audacity of their journey. And as science peels back more layers, one thing becomes clear: the first Americans didn't follow a script, they wrote it, one bold step at a time. The towering Moai statues of Easter Island have long stood as silent sentinels of a civilization's collapse, or so we thought. For decades, the story of Rapa Nui served as the ultimate ecological parable. A society so obsessed with carving and transporting these massive stone figures that they chopped down every last palm tree, triggering soil erosion, famine, and societal collapse. It was a tidy morality tale about human hubris, a warning etched in volcanic rock. But archaeology has a way of complicating our favorite stories. Recent discoveries suggest the Rapa Nui didn't just vanish in a blaze of self-destruction. Their downfall was slower, messier, and far more tragic, a collision of environmental strain and external forces beyond their control. Take those iconic palm trees. Pollen samples do show the island was once forested, but the idea that deforestation happened overnight is a myth. Evidence suggests the Rapa Nui managed their resources carefully, shifting from large-scale statue construction to smaller moai over time, adapting as conditions changed. Their ingenious rock gardens, filled with broken volcanic stones to retain moisture and boost crop yields, reveal a people deeply attuned to their fragile ecosystem. They weren't blindly ravaging their home, they were innovating to survive it. Then came the real catastrophe: European contact. When Dutch explorers landed in 1722, they brought more than just curiosity. They introduced disease, violence, and the brutal slave raids that would eventually claim half the population. The real death knell for Rapa Nui wasn't just ecological. It was the arrival of outsiders who saw the islanders as expendable. The statues didn't topple because the trees ran out. They fell because the people who revered them were ripped away. Yet even in collapse, the Rapa Nui left clues to their resilience. Oral traditions speak of the Birdman cult, a later ritual where warriors swam to offshore islets to retrieve seabird eggs, a shift from ancestor worship to a new kind of spiritual focus. Their descendants still live on the island today, keeping the language and customs alive despite centuries of hardship. That's the real lesson here. Civilizations don't fail because of a single mistake. They adapt, they struggle, and sometimes they're undone by forces they never saw coming. The Moai aren't just relics of a fallen people. They're monuments to the complexity of survival and the dangers of reducing history to simple cautionary tales. The glittering gold crowns of the Silla kingdom aren't just artifacts, they're masterpieces of political theater, crafted with delicate, branching designs that seem to grow like sacred trees. These royal headpieces weren't merely symbols of wealth, they were visual manifestos. Each twisting gold strand and dangling jade pendant proclaimed a divine right to rule, blending indigenous Korean shamanism with the imported prestige of Buddhism. But Silla's brilliance wasn't confined to its workshops. In the 7th century, this once small southeastern kingdom achieved what no other had. It unified Korea's warring states, not just through conquest, but through a shrewd alliance with Tang China that rewrote the playbook of East Asian power dynamics. The real genius of Silla's rise lay in its balancing act. While its armies battled rivals like Goguryeo and Beech, its diplomats were busy negotiating with Tang emperors, offering tribute in exchange for military backing. This wasn't submission, it was strategy. By positioning themselves as the Tang's favored partner, Silla's rulers secured the cavalry and siege engineers that tipped the scales in their favor. The result, by 668 CE, the Korean peninsula was united under Silla's rule, with the Tang eventually persuaded to withdraw their troops. It was a diplomatic tightrope walk worthy of any modern statecraft manual, using a superpower's strength without becoming its puppet. Yet for all its gold and glory, Silla's golden age carried the seeds of its undoing. The very Tang alliance that propelled them to dominance became a double-edged sword. As the kingdom's elite grew obsessed with Chinese fashions, adopting Tang poetry, court rituals, even hairstyles, they neglected the local systems that had sustained their power. Aristocrats, lavished with Tang-bestowed titles, grew disconnected from the farmers and artisans who fueled the economy. Meanwhile, the cost of maintaining lavish embassies to China drained royal coffers. By the 9th century, regional warlords began peeling away from the capital, and when peasant revolts erupted, the once mighty kingdom fractured into the later three kingdoms. What lingers isn't just the cautionary tale, but the cultural alchemy Silla achieved. Their Bulguksa temple, with its serene stone pagodas and gilded Buddha statues, remains a UNESCO treasure, a physical testament to how Buddhism was reshaped by Korean hands. Even their downfall holds a lesson. Hybridity can be a strength, but only when rooted in self-sustaining systems. Today, as Korea navigates its own tensions between global influence and local identity, Silla's legacy whispers across the centuries, a reminder that true sovereignty isn't just about who you ally with, but who you remain when the alliances fade. The Srivijaya Empire didn't just dominate trade, it mastered the art of ruling the seas without leaving footprints on land. For 6 centuries, this maritime superpower controlled the Malacca Strait, the narrow passage between Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula that served as the ancient world's busiest shipping lane. Picture a kingdom with no grand stone temples or towering monuments, its wealth flowing not from conquests or farmland, but from the decks of merchant ships passing through its waters. Every vessel laden with Chinese porcelain, Indian spices, or Arabian incense paid a price for safe passage, filling Srivijaya's coffers with gold and gems while its rulers sat comfortably inland, far from the coastlines where rivals might attack. What's fascinating isn't just their economic model, it's how perfectly they adapted to their environment. Unlike the Khmer with their sprawling stone cities or the Javanese with their volcanic temples, Srivijaya built almost entirely from wood and bamboo, materials that rotted away in the humid tropics. Their capital, Palembang, wasn't a city of marble but a floating network of stilt houses and docks, a Venice of the East that left almost no trace when abandoned. This invisibility frustrates archaeologists but speaks volumes about their priorities. Why invest in stone when your real power lies in controlling the currents beneath ships' hulls? Yet their influence was anything but fleeting. Chinese monks like Yijing wrote of Srivijaya as a bustling hub of Buddhist scholarship, where travelers stopped to study Sanskrit before journeying to India. Inscriptions on surviving stone pillars, rare exceptions to their wooden world, reveal a kingdom that patronized monasteries and hosted scholars from across Asia. Their reach extended through sheer soft power, their language, Old Malay, becoming the lingua franca of maritime trade from Java to Ceylon. Even the name Srivijaya wasn't discovered in local ruins but in Chinese chronicles and Arab sailors' logs, a ghost empire pieced together from the records of those who crossed its path. The empire's decline holds a sobering lesson about the fragility of trade-based powers. When Song Dynasty China shifted from Southeast Asian intermediaries to direct trade with India in the 13th century, Srivijaya's relevance evaporated almost overnight. No invasions, no natural disasters, just the slow bleed of economic obsolescence. Later kingdoms like Majapahit built on their legacy, but Srivijaya itself melted back into the jungle, its wooden palaces reclaimed by mangroves. Today, its memory lives in subtle ways. The Malay word for king, Sri, echoes their name, and modern Indonesia's strategic focus on maritime routes mirrors their ancient playbook. Srivijaya's story reminds us that greatness isn't always carved in stone. Sometimes it's written in the wake of passing ships, visible only to those who know where to look. The Kukuteni Tripilia culture didn't just build villages, they orchestrated them on a scale that would make modern urban planners pause. Stretching across what is now Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania, their settlements around 4100 BC weren't mere clusters of huts but planned mega-villages, some spanning over 300 hectares, larger than many Bronze Age cities that would follow. Picture concentric rings of longhouses, their walls made of wattle and daub, their floors polished clay, arranged with a precision that suggests more than just practical living. These weren't haphazard communities. They were deliberate, even ritualistic layouts that echoed the spirals and loops found on their iconic pottery. But here's the twist: every few generations they burned it all down. Not by accident, not by war, but in what appears to be a calculated act. Archaeologists find layers of ash and charred timbers, each destruction followed by rebuilding, often on the same spot, sometimes with eerily similar floor plans. The fires were too uniform, too complete to be disasters. This was a cycle, a rhythm of creation and destruction repeated every 60 to 80 years like clockwork. What kind of society invests years constructing hundreds of homes only to deliberately reduce them to embers? The answer might lie in their staggering clay figurines. Thousands have been unearthed, from miniature goddesses with exaggerated hips to androgynous figures with spiral-painted bodies. Some scholars see a fertility cult. Others suggest these were avatars of a cosmic cycle, where destruction wasn't an end but a rebirth. The spirals dominating their art, etched into pottery, pressed into clay altars, could symbolize this very idea: life, death, and renewal as an endless loop. If so, their burning rituals weren't acts of waste but profound ceremonies, a way to sync human existence with the rhythms of the earth. What's equally puzzling is what's missing. Despite their sophistication, the Cucuteni Tripilia left no evidence of social hierarchy: no palaces, no grand tombs, no storerooms hoarding wealth. Their mega villages suggest collective labor, their artifacts imply shared symbolism, and their destruction cycles hint at communal sacrifice. This wasn't a culture obsessed with individual legacy. It was one that embraced impermanence as a sacred principle. In an age where we equate progress with monuments that outlast millennia, their choice to reset the clock every few generations feels radical, even poetic. Yet their disappearance around 3000 BC is as enigmatic as their rituals. Some blame climate shifts drying up their fertile lower soils. Others point to migrations of horse-riding steppe peoples. But perhaps the most haunting theory is that they didn't so much collapse as choose to stop rebuilding. After centuries of cycles, the fires burned and no one returned. Their legacy lingers not in ruins but in the quiet challenge they pose. What if the measure of a civilization isn't how long it lasts, but how deeply it understood its own rhythm? The Cucuteni Tripilia didn't just live in their world, they danced with it, flame by sacred flame. The North Chico civilization didn't just defy expectations, it rewrote the rules of what a society could achieve. While other ancient cultures were mastering pottery or domesticating grains, these Peruvian innovators were building monumental pyramids along the arid Pacific coast, all without ceramics or staple crops like wheat or corn. Instead, their secret lay in the ocean's abundance and a single ingenious crop: cotton. Imagine a civilization where fishnets woven from cultivated cotton became the economic engine, traded inland for the fruits and vegetables that couldn't grow in their desert homeland. This wasn't just survival, it was a masterclass in resourcefulness, proving that complexity could flourish without the agricultural playbook followed by the rest of the ancient world. What's truly baffling is the scale of their achievements. At Caral, the oldest known city in the Americas, 6 pyramids rise from the dust, their terraced walls built from millions of stone-filled bags called shikras. The largest, the Pyramid Maya, stands nearly 100 feet tall, a feat requiring thousands of workers. Yet there's no evidence of kings, no storerooms hoarding surplus, no signs of the oppressive hierarchies seen in Egypt or Mesopotamia. Instead, archaeologists find communal plazas, shared storage spaces, and musical instruments made of pelican bones. The North Chico seem to organize through collective effort, their labor perhaps motivated by shared rituals or reciprocal trade rather than coercion. Their economy was as unconventional as their architecture. While most early civilizations relied on grain surpluses to fuel growth, the North Chico thrived on anchovies. The Humboldt Current, one of the world's richest marine ecosystems, provided a seemingly endless supply of fish, dried and traded inland for crops like beans and squash. Cotton was the linchpin grown in irrigated valleys. It was spun into nets that fed the fishing industry, creating a self-sustaining cycle. This wasn't just a subsistence strategy. It was an early example of economic specialization, with coastal and inland communities bound together in a symbiotic network. The absence of pottery only deepens the mystery. While other cultures used ceramics for cooking and storage, the Mochica relied on gourds and woven baskets, leaving behind no broken shards to mark their presence. Their art, too, is elusive, no grand statues or intricate carvings, just simple clay figurines and the occasional geometric design. This lack of material grandeur suggests a society less concerned with individual legacy than with collective function. Even their decline is enigmatic. Around 1800 BCE, their cities were peacefully abandoned, their pyramids left to the wind. Some theories point to climate shifts disrupting marine productivity. Others suggest their trade networks unraveled as inland cultures developed their own coastal connections. The real revelation of the Mochica isn't just their uniqueness, it's the challenge they pose to our assumptions. For centuries, historians argued that agriculture, pottery, and centralized power were the essential ingredients of civilization. These coastal pioneers prove otherwise. They built monuments without monarchs, sustained cities without cereal crops, and left behind a legacy that whispers, there are countless ways to thrive. In a world obsessed with linear progress, their story is a reminder that human ingenuity doesn't follow a script. It adapts, improvises, and occasionally rewrites the rules entirely. As we've journeyed through these lost empires, one truth emerges. Civilizations rise and fall, but their echoes never truly fade. Whether through technological innovations, artistic masterpieces, or cautionary tales of collapse, they shape our world in ways we're still uncovering. These mysteries invite us to keep exploring, questioning, and learning from the past. So, what forgotten empire resonates with you? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's hidden chapters. Until next time, keep mapping the unknown. Yet the story doesn't end with ruins and relics. It lives in the questions we carry forward. Every time we walk a city street laid out in a grid, we're stepping in the footsteps of the Indus Valley. When we marvel at a skyscraper's steel frame, we're touching the legacy of Hittite ironworkers. Even our struggles, climate crises, economic upheaval, the tension between progress and sustainability, mirror the challenges these civilizations faced. Their triumphs and failures aren't locked in the past. They're mirrors held up to our own moment in history. Perhaps that's the real gift of these lost empires. They remind us that civilization isn't a straight line of progress, but a tapestry of experiments, some brilliant, some tragic, all instructive. The Garamontes wells, the Khmer's reservoirs, the Rapa Nui's rock gardens, each offers a blueprint for resilience, a warning against hubris, or a spark of inspiration. And the greatest lesson of all, no society, no matter how advanced, is immune to change. The same ingenuity that builds empires must also adapt them, or risk becoming another whisper in the archaeological record. So as we close this chapter, let's not say goodbye to these civilizations, but thank you. Thank you for the art that still moves us, the innovations that still serve us, and the stories that still challenge us. The next time you see a spiral motif on a pot, a canal feeding a field, or even a humble clay brick, pause for a moment. You might just be looking at the handwriting of a culture that refused to be forgotten. The map of history is vast, and we've only just begun to trace its contours. Where should we explore next? The choice, as always, is yours.